And it comes from the book of Acts, chapter 16. I'll be reading 12 through 15. And where we pick Paul up in this particular book is he's in Philippi. He has gone on his missionary journey, and he comes upon a woman named Lydia, and he is observing her as she goes about her work. From there, we went inland to Philippi, a city in the first district of Macedonia. It is also a Roman colony. We spent several days there. On the Sabbath, we went out to the city, to the riverside, where we thought there would be a place where Jews gathered for prayer. We sat down and talked to the women who had gathered there. One of those who heard us was Lydia from Thyatira, who was a dealer in purple cloth. She was a woman who worshiped God, and the Lord opened her mind to pay attention to what Paul was saying. After she and the people of her house had been baptized, she invited us to come and stay in my house if you have decided that I'm a true believer in the Lord, she said. And she persuaded us to go. This is the word of the Lord. This morning, Christy and I are sharing our message for you this day. And you have your introduction first.
Okay, yeah. Slide that will show women.
That's not of us. There we go. All right. There are some 150 women that are mentioned or at least referred to and remain unnamed throughout the Bible. Does that amaze anybody? All the women, please raise your hand. Just kidding. All right. And we thought we would present a few of these to you and see. You know what? I'm going to throw Christy a curve right off the bat. That's why she works with me and is used to it. Can anybody take a guess at anybody up there? What about, let's start this way. What about the woman on your far right? Mary? Mary who? There you go. Do you know that when you pick up that list this morning, I'm already going off script. When you pick up that list this morning and you see those names, they label some of them Mary 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Mary Magdalene. Mary was a very common name. So be blessed that you aren't like Anne 13. Okay, you're right. And that's indicated, not that we know them personally. Obviously, this is an artist rendition. However, we picked that because we think it's a really good one. That's the stone behind Jesus' tomb. Right there was your clue. So you also need to be detectives this morning, just saying. Okay, what about the next one? Miriam. Could be. It could be somebody else? There you go. It could be the woman at the well. See the jug? There we are. Okay. Who's next? Deborah, somebody said. Christy.
Abigail. That was Abigail.
Noble attempt, Pat. Noble attempt. And then in the center?
Esther. Yep, I heard it. Good.
Really? Yes. Okay. Queen Esther. Again, these are renditions, so there we are. Okay. How about after Esther? Does purple cloth give you a hint? Yeah. That would be Lydia. We're going to talk more about her. And how about with the sheaves on her shoulder? Boy, that was quick. Awesome. And what about the last one? He's got one woman and he's sticking with her. There we go. That's fidelity, Pat. That is an unnamed woman, and we included that on purpose because there are many, many, many women that are referred to in the Gospels, in the New Testament, in the Old Testament, but they remain unnamed. So there we are. Today is a special day for mothers. We thank God this morning for all of them. Those that gave birth to children, those that became mothers by adoption, by fostering, or even by mentoring. Those women who took that role and perhaps didn't even know it, yet someone looks up to that woman because she has or had nurtured them in the same way that a mother would. We even want to thank the women who serve as dog moms and cat moms to all of the animals who otherwise would remain homeless. So this morning, yes, friends, we would like to honor all women, especially women of faith, young and old alike, who deserve and desire to be godly women. There's a Christian writer named Elizabeth Elliot, and she wrote this line that touched me. She said this: "The fact that I am a woman does not make me a different kind of Christian, but the fact that I am a Christian does make me a different kind of woman." This morning, Christy and I will look at a small sample of the women in Scripture and perhaps uncover some qualities that you have noticed in the women in your lives. Christy?
So the first one we're going to talk about is Ruth, which you guys guessed, and Ruth is actually on your cover. Those are why we picked those three. Mm-hmm. She was a Moabite who left her gods and her homeland to become a worshiper of Jehovah in the land of Israel. So Ruth's reputation, so what we can learn from what Ruth did, is that as a devoted daughter-in-law and a hard worker, she soon earned her good name in Naomi's hometown, Bethlehem. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. A wealthy landowner named Boaz was deeply impressed by Ruth and generously provided food for her and Naomi. Ruth later married Boaz and became an ancestor to both King David and Jesus Christ. Yep. And now, Queen Esther. She was a Jewess who had become chosen by a Persian king to become his queen. One thing we can learn from Esther is Queen Esther set an outstanding example of courage, humility, and modesty, which I thought was interesting they included that one. Mm-hmm. Despite her beauty and position, she sought counsel and help. When speaking with her husband, she was tactful and respectful, but bold. And at a time of great danger for the Jews, she courageously identified herself as one of them.
And now we take a look into Lydia. She was born in Thyatira, a famous center for the indigo trade. Lydia was a businesswoman, self-made. She lived and moved to Philippi when Paul met her by the river on his second mission. Later on, archaeologists found among the ruins in Philippi remnants perhaps of her business. They found inscriptions relating to dyes from indigo dyeing that formed a very prestigious guild in that city, much like our artist guilds today. And it's a supposition, of course, but it's interesting that many think that she was one of the few women members of that guild. When Paul found her, she was honoring the Sabbath. That led him to assume that she perhaps wasn't a Gentile, but she was honoring the Jewish tradition. She was worshiping the Sabbath. Lydia heard the gospel of Jesus preached, and Scripture says that God, there it is, God opened her heart. She was baptized. She had the rest of her household went and they were baptized. And later she did open her home, which was large, and she was very generous. And she opened her home to missionaries that were bringing the good news to Philippi. Led me to look a little further, and we find out that because she was insistent on opening her home, it was large. Her slaves lived with her, as well as we don't know how many family members, but she had and managed, while she had her business, a very large household. She was very well off. Nonetheless, Lydia had a heart for God, and she was baptized into the saving grace of God and Jesus Christ. And she offered the missionaries the gift of what? Hospitality. How many women do we all know in our lives that really love to entertain, right? We love to make food. I love to cook. Not 7 days a week. Just saying. But isn't there something special when somebody asks you, could you make? And you know what? Particularly in the women of the church, whoever you are, if we say, could somebody just make this? We have 3 or 4 people saying, I'll do it, I'll do it. That's hospitality, my friends. Lydia, as I mentioned, was also a working woman. She owned her own business. She was the seller of purple cloth. Why is that a full-blown business trade? Because if you know anything about natural dyes, it is an arduous process. You have to find the plants. You have to beat them down to extract the color, the dye in them. You have to boil them. Can you tell I'm a fiber artist? I've been through all of this. It's a very long, intense process. And why purple? Because Lydia became known for turning that then dye into the cloth that was sold to royalty at the time. Kings, I keep looking at that, it's not up there. Kings, queens, royalty would purchase that cloth. They were the only people that wore that. That was a sign that you were of royal lineage. So it was a very practical yet expensive thing, and people paid for that. She had owned a spacious home. Her house was large enough for her family and her servants, yet she still had room for the missionaries. So you can imagine that Lydia's house was known among Philippians. And I mentioned she was wealthy. She did well. Isn't that what we wish for your kids and our kids? She also had qualities that we need to think about today. The first one was hospitality, like I mentioned. Now, that doesn't just mean signing up for something or entertaining once a month and having a dinner with your friends, although that's a part, right? Hospitality takes 2 things. One is seeing the need, recognizing the need without the person saying anything. Are there people here this morning that are hesitant to ask for help? Please don't let me be alone. Come on. Yeah. I'm getting better. But isn't that something that we all go, and you don't know how many times in a pastoral care situation that I have said, how about if I do this? We could get the church to do that. And Margie, what's the answer?
No, help somebody else who really needs it.
Thank you. That wasn't scripted. That just came right out of, yeah. That we get that all the time. No, I'm fine. Just help somebody else who really needs it. So how do you know who really needs it if nobody's going to ask, right? You have to have, here comes the detective skills again. You have to have the detective skills to know who may be in need and then just do it. She was also an active believer before she met Paul. It was clear that she started out life as a Gentile, and then as she went on with her business that maybe took her to open another shop in Philippi, she moved there and she saw all the Jewish women, and they were worshiping at the river because there wasn't enough Jewish population in Philippi to build a synagogue. And so she learned, and it says that she did adopt that Jewish faith. So she was a God believer before she met Paul. Paul is the one that brought her the good news, and she, as it said, God opened her heart, and she was ready, and she enveloped that. So she was an active believer. That's another quality this morning. Obviously, if she went through making a successful business out of purple cloth, she was a hard worker, because I just described to you how long it takes just to get that dye to come to fruition. And the other thing we can discern from her life by looking at that is that she was generous with giving. She took care of her family and her servants and the missionaries and acted again, just didn't send a check. She acted on that by physically opening her home and helping people out. The fifth quality that I thought about this week was that Lydia was a relationship builder. She had to be a relationship builder because she had to build a relationship with royalty, with the Romans, and in order for them to purchase from her and not just cast her aside, she had to build a relationship with them, as well as the Jewish women, as well as the missionaries, as well as the people of the town, for her to be successful. That one is often forgotten, gang, isn't it? Yeah. Women are good at building relationships, right? Now, maintaining and keeping is just like the rest of us. We're all in that same relationship boat together. But for this time in Christian history, she was a model. Scripture gives us many examples of godly women and exactly what they might look like, as you've heard this morning. I'd like you to take a minute for me and picture one or two women in your life. Not necessarily mothers, although it certainly is one that we all look to, right? But perhaps there's a really good friend. Perhaps it's someone younger, a niece, a granddaughter, someone that you used to work with as a woman. I want you to think about that just for a minute and just think of one or maybe two. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to do that. If you've got that face in front of you, that image in front of you in your mind, I'd like you to now not focus on a memory. Because isn't that what we do most often when we think back and we think of someone and we think of a story that's connected to it? And that's good. But this morning, I'd like you to turn that and twist it just a little bit. I would like you to think of a quality that attracts you to honoring that woman that you have the image of. If you had to name a quality or two, because there's multiple qualities, obviously, but what stands out, like the women that we talked about this morning? Was it hospitality? Was it courage? We go to Ruth. I keep pointing to a picture that's not there. We go to Ruth, and we could say that she was steadfast. We could say that she was humble. There are many qualities, right? When I think of Ruth, I think of courage. It took a lot for her to pack up and go with Naomi. That's what I would like for you to take away this day. And you can make a list, if you're so inclined today, to label those women in your life, and maybe you get 5. And instead of just remembering fondly, remember what they were about in terms of the person that they were. I think you will be amazed when you reflect on the people that you have loved or love, when you put them next to godly qualities. I have one more mother this morning, and this woman had the title of mother, even though she never was one. And I'm talking about Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And one of her last writings was a piece that I noticed in our office manager Joanne's office last week, posted right next to her computer. And I'd like to share that as we close. Mother Teresa said this: "People are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyway. If you find happiness, people may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyway. For you see, in the end, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway." And the people said, where are we? This morning, I'll remind you of our offering. We are using, for the new folks who have just returned and maybe we didn't have this in place, our treasure chest is in the back, and you can help us. That's our making our budget and our giving right there. So if you could remember to give. We also have it online now, and we can go to the website and you can give online. But we need to bring the people of God together to sustain the work of the church. And so now we are going to have our anthem from our